The latest developments in Berserk 376 suggest that we are on the brink of a cataclysmic moment. Griffith is heading towards the east to do battle with the Kushan Empire. And in response, the Kushans are enlisting the help of the mages and the Guts' party to do battle with the demon army. Now, given the events that took place with the destruction of Elfhelm, one has to wonder, what chance does anyone have against an omnipotent being like Griffith? If we think about it, Griffith cannot be touched. He can read the flow of causality, i.e. the future, and he can warp reality to his own will. Now, with the destruction of Shiva and the advent of Fantasia, I believe we've been given context clues to how Guts might be able to attain his revenge. Now, before I present my theory, I need to explain the astral and physical realms within Berserk. And it's actually rather simple, but at the same time, it's rather complex and convoluted. Now, according to Shirka, there exists a trinity. The physical realm, the world of spirits, i.e. the astral realm, and the world of idea, i.e. the origin of all existence. The physical realm is everything that is associated with life, whereas the astral is associated with the afterlife. While they are two different states of being, there are layers that can overlap with each other that are commonly referred to as the interstice. Not only that, there are beings that have a footing within the interstice, and can thusly interact with both the physical and astral worlds. Now, these beings would include witches, wizards, and those who have been branded, like Guts and Casca. In addition, it would seem that the Skull Knight resides within these two realms as well. Now, the realms are not fixed states. There's a potential for them to become more or less overlapped, depending on certain circumstances. For example, full moons seem to broaden the extent of these overlapping regions, making the power of magic more manifest. An eclipse, an event where the moon blocks out the sun, does this even further, allowing members of the God Hand to manifest within the physical realm for a brief period of time. Speaking of which, it would seem the deeper one ventures into the astral realm, i.e. the further they get away from the physical realm, the less time seems to flow. Now, the way that I interpret this is that the physical world exhibits a fixed state of time flow, while each subsequent layer of the astral realm seems to slow time further and further, to the point that it does not move whatsoever as you get deeper in. In fact, during the events of the eclipse, it was suggested that time was at a standstill. They were essentially frozen in time, if you will. And this explains the time dilation effect that we saw in the PCAF story. He went deep into the astral realm, and then when he came back to the physical realm, realized that many years had gone by, decades, centuries in fact. And Isma's mother warned the Guts party about this when they entered Elfhelm. However, after the destruction of Elfhelm, it seemed like no time passed whatsoever. It seems like the time effects of the real world and Elfhelm were relatively the same. Now, why was this? How come the story was untrue? Well, what we gotta remember is that given the advent of Fantasia, the whole Earth now is existing within the interstice. In fact, we would have to think that it's a very deep layer of the interstice. What I'm suggesting is that the overlapping region is such that it is basically mimicking the time dilation effects of Elfhelm, which means that the time on Earth is all about the same right now. There's no differences at the moment. Which is why we didn't see any time dilation effects whatsoever. Now, how do lands like Elfhelm and the Mansion of the Spirit Tree create these effects? They essentially are like sanctuaries/bubbles from the real world. Well, think of these regions as a sort of consciousness, a will/desire for peace and tranquility. They manifest out of the world of idea, out of a dream for something better. Dreams in Berserk are much like the astral realm. They can be both positive and negative. They are realms where time is slowed down and fantastical creatures beyond our imagination can take root. And depending on whether or not they're good or bad, all depends on our beliefs and fears, the emotions of our heart. So you see, these trees are able to leech off of the world spiral tree. They're able to take some of its essence away, and through the power of the idea, are able to create something new. Now, what is currently happening within the Berserk universe is the complete annihilation of the parasitic trees. Because of this, these good-natured sanctuaries are disappearing in rapid succession, eliminating the positive influence they exert on the environment. Think of it like a Christmas tree. Each spiritual tree is like a single light, a source of hope and happiness. With each light being snuffed out by Griffith's army, the trees have become bleak and destitute. Furthermore, the power that was zapped from the World Spiral Tree goes back to its original source, making the World Spiral Tree that much more potent. And because of that, the regions between the physical and the astral realms overlap that much more. As we know, with the advent of Fantasia, the overlapping regions became such that monsters like giants, Hydra, and dragons could coexist with humans. And since then, Griffith along with his demon army have relentlessly pursued and killed each one of these monsters that have come into being. The idea is that Griffith is becoming the only source of hope, the only source of happiness that people can believe in. In the people's eyes, he is the absolute. He is the idea of good. Now, from the perspective of a Berserk reader, this is a powerful statement, so let me repeat that. Griffith is becoming the idea of good. Now, for us to fully appreciate this, we have to understand its ramifications. And for that, we have to go back to chapter 83 and better understand the idea of evil. "What's this?" replies Griffith. "An ocean of feelings. All humans have deep in their souls a common consciousness that transcends individuality. Their collective consciousness as a species. Its dark side is a swelling ocean. I was born from these swells, as the ego of this world. I am this world. The darkness that dwells in every human heart. The idea of evil. This is God." Now, humans unconsciously created the idea of evil through their collective desire for a justifiable reason for tragedy in their life. And Void weaponized these people's desires through the seductive nature of the Holy See.
Would you want to stay a certain distance away from the devil?
The devil's very sexually seductive.
Or we would presume that he did this. It's highly speculated that Void created the Holy See back over 1,000 years ago. However, we don't know this for certain. But given the fact that he's the one that brands people with the brand of sacrifice, it's highly possible that he did. Now, I want you to pay attention to this quote right here. "This hill upon which the church is built, it used to be a shrine to the spirits of this land. Many of the Holy See's churches are that way, literally crushing the sacred places of the spirit faith where they were built. Now, by squashing the influences of witches, fairies, and other magical influences, the Holy See effectively eliminated the idea of these entities completely. Now, Griffith is merely speeding up this process through his incessant destruction of the magical places. And so you see, Griffith is not only manipulating things through the astral realm as Femto, but he's also doing it through the physical realm as Griffith. But he's doing this even further through the idea realm as his role as the Messiah. And each time he eliminates the forces of good, the resulting evil becomes that much more prevalent and that much more potent, which, in the end, he uses to his own benefit. He uses it to build upon his own legend as the absolute, the idea of good. Now, the God Hand utilized the Holy See's insidious nature to make the people collectively desire God. This swelling idea brought about the incarnation of Griffith in the physical realm, and the chapters in which this happened were titled Shadows of the Idea. And in Carl Jung's model of the human psyche, the shadow is the repressed portion of ourselves. But now I believe Griffith desires something more. He's setting the stage so that everyone has to live in Falconia. And by destroying the various spiritual trees around the world, ever greater threats are going to come forward, and he will defeat every last one of them. And then the greatest threat of all will come. And I believe that's the purpose of Falconia, having that one safe haven. Because Griffith will use all those swelling emotions, all those desires to create an even more powerful form. To create something even greater than the God Hand themselves. Because as they noted, they themselves are not gods. And Griffith is one who soars ever higher. He's always reaching for more. But here's the thing. Griffith shares a body with the Moonlight Boy. And when the full moon rises, magical power is more manifest. Which means the Moonlight Boy is somehow able to overwhelm Griffith. He's somehow able to take control of that body for himself. Does that mean that if the people in Falconia desire something good, that it will bring about a form of power that will allow the Moonlight Boy to supersede Griffith? And to thusly use his new power to defeat the God Hand themselves? Or do they cut off the source of power altogether? Do they go to the idea of evil, slice it down, which in effect would destroy the world spiral tree, and destroy all the astral and ethereal beings completely? Now, if this does come to fruition, we have to keep one thing in mind. The Moonlight Boy himself is an ethereal being, which means that if he goes through with this plan, he'll be sacrificing himself. But given that he's a Christ-like archetype, this motif seems to make sense. Christ sacrificed himself for the sins of humanity, and the Moonlight Boy likewise might sacrifice himself for the evils of humanity within Berserk. Humans created the idea of evil through their need for reason, and thus the Moonlight Boy will put an end to this by sacrificing himself. for the mistakes that humans made. I think this could be a pretty cool ending if it comes to fruition. Now, one last thing I want to mention before I end the video. Remember how Guts was born from the corpse of a woman hanged on a tree? There is some speculation out there that the people that were hanged on this tree were mages or wizards. Is it possible that this was one of the trees that was parasitic, that was siphoning off energy from the world spiral tree? And if so, that means it was endowed with some magical properties. And that might explain why Guts was saved when he was just an infant. Perhaps the tree imbued him with some magical essence, sort of like pixie dust, you know? Some healing property that preserved him so that he didn't die within his mother's womb. You know, anything's possible. I mean, it is a theory. But anyway, I know I put a lot of information out for you guys. Tell me what you think of these theories, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the flip side.